which is immeasurable cannot go anywhere. The life of such a one like that is testimony to the power of our spirit. That last statement is not an accident. The life of Christ is a testimony to the power of your spirit. Sometimes people say, wait a minute, how is that? It is exactly like that.
Action!
Hello everyone, welcome to the Spirit of Yoga. I am Devdas from the Akasha Yoga Academy. It's my pleasure, my joy to be here with you today, talking on the topic of love. And when this first was brought to my attention, my wife Kirsten sent me a message and basically said, Devdas, I'd like you to give a talk on love, and it's coming up towards Christmas time, so why not make it a topic of love in Christ? Devdas said. Hare, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So much gratitude in my heart. What a topic. But it's a little bit like saying to somebody, I would like you to give a 10-minute talk on infinity. It's like how can you talk for 10 minutes on infinity? And the same feeling is in my heart on the topic of Christ and love. How can you talk about that which is beyond all words in an intelligent and meaningful way, which I hope is something that we accomplish together today, looking at the topic of love, looking at the topic of Christ. I mean, if you want to just take it down to a single sentence, there was a man who lived a life of such love and devotion that 2,000 years later, everyone remembers who he is. Just that alone, what a starting point for contemplation. There was a man whose love was so alive, whose spirit was so present. That 2,000 years later, it's as if he was with us now. He is with us now. That's the whole yogic science of understanding that which is immeasurable cannot go anywhere. The life of such a one like that is testimony to the power of our spirit. That last statement is not an accident. The life of Christ is a testimony to the power of your spirit. Sometimes people say, wait a minute, how is that? It is exactly like that. Why? Someone came to Christ in his lifetime and said, Master, you do these miracles. You can do things that normal people can't do. You can heal people. You can, turn water into wine. You can do just things that normal people can't do. And Christ turned to that one and said, greater things than these you will also do. So someone comes and says, "Good Father, you make these miracles. You are above us." And he says, "We are one. I am not above or below. Greater things than these you will do." The same kind of conundrum happened in the life of myself with my teacher in India. He had powers that normal people don't have. And it was very hard to reconcile where he was sitting and where I was sitting. I just looked at him with so much reverence because he seemed to be able to do things that normal people can't do. And yet one time when I called him on the phone to ask him if I could come over, he said, "Are you coming alone?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Then the whole universe is coming." I just couldn't say a single word. It was just like, whoa. But that's his lived experience. I think I thought at one point in my spiritual journey that he was just being kind, which means he was so much qualified and I so underqualified. And it was his graciousness and his kindness with which he was expressing something. But what's more true than that is that it's not an act of kindness, it is an act of understanding. And perhaps that needs a little bit of explanation. A soul like that knows that everything comes from one source. It's one integrated experience, the divinity. Now, it has lots of different faces, it has lots of different forms, it has lots of different ways that it expresses itself, from flowers to trees to human beings to stars and far beyond. But it all has the same source. So, if we look at something that's one, and a good example of something that's one would be your body. It's one integrated whole. If you then say, you know, "I'm not so sure about my hand. I mean, it hasn't really been acting the way that it's supposed to. Maybe it's not really part of the body." You would just say, "That's complete nonsense. It's one integrated whole. You don't divide it into pieces. It's just here as one whole entity. And the hand is as much a part of your body as your foot or your knee or your chin or your medulla oblongata or anything else." That is also what's being seen by a sage. Someone comes to Christ and says, "Good Master, you do these miracles. I cannot do these miracles." He said, "You yourself will do greater things than these." What does he mean? He means it's all one body. It's all one integrated whole. Recently, someone came to me, a dear, dear, dear one, so beautiful. And she said, she asked about mentorship. She asked about the possibility of, regularly sitting together and contemplating and having your doubts answered. And I was very grateful that she came. We talked, and we've since had a chance to meet. It's been a very beautiful process. But what was very interesting to me is that when she came, she said, "I wanted to come to you maybe a year ago after I took a Vipassana, but I didn't feel like I was worthy." And it just like kind of struck me that in the absolute sense of who you are, in the absolute sense of spirit and divinity, that which cannot be described, the concept of one part being less valuable than another doesn't exist. The same way that you wouldn't say that your hand is more valuable than your knee or your knee more valuable than your hand. It's one. The concept of worthiness or unworthiness is not present in the space of your soul's knowing. And in fact, it can be a very real impediment to the recognition of the light of your own heart, right? I'm not worthy to understand. My teacher in India used to say, if you want to understand, stand under. What does it mean? I want to understand. Stand under. Stand under doesn't mean like, stand under means, with reverence, you're absorbing from the Great Spirit the truth of your own heart and of life. In my own journey, well, let's maybe phrase it differently. Christ played a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful role in my own unfolding. Most of my unfolding happened in India, but then I had the good fortune also to be in Italy after the passing of my spiritual teacher after he left the body. And it was kind of a challenging time because that was a very close and very powerful and very beautiful friendship. I used to there's something in yoga called bhavs. Bhavs means like the way that you perceive the divinity. And I used to perceive my teacher as my best friend because his love was so total. There was just never a question mark in my mind. Once recently on a Zoom call, someone was talking about a spiritual teacher and something that they did. One of the women on the call said, that makes me uncomfortable because I don't think any human being should have that kind of control over another human being. And I responded, my teacher in India would have hurt himself before he hurt me. What is that love? What is that love? So powerful that it would take the suffering of others onto itself. And is that the reason why 2,000 years later we remember Christ in our hearts? Because here was a man who hadn't done anything but uplift others, subject to the worst kind of treatment, who had the power right in the center of it to say, forgive them, Lord. They know not what they do. In the height of your struggles as a human being, in the height of the dark night of your soul, remember that line. Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do. And that's just one of many extremely potent, kind of almost like mantras that were uttered from the mouth of that one that we remember so long, 2,000 years after he left this earth. Anyway, I was saying that after the passing of my teacher in India, I was in Italy, and someone brought me to see a mystic that had been inspired by the life of Christ. He was actually a student of Padre Pio. Padre Pio was a great Christian, Catholic, I should say, great Catholic stigmatist. Stigmatist means he had the marks of Christ on his body, and very famous and extremely well loved in Italy, extremely well loved. Phenomenal soul. Someone asked him at one point, there's a very nice movie actually about his life, if you want to look it up, called just Padre Pio. It's Italian, but I think it has English subtitles, so it's worth looking at it if you're interested. And in that movie, and also in his life story, there's this line that someone comes to him and says, "Pio, what's the greatest miracle?" And he said, "The greatest miracle is 2,000 years after the life of Christ, there are still people that dedicate their entire life to him." I said, wow. Wow. That is a miracle. Well, it's not so much a miracle also. It's an act of profound intelligence. But one of his students I had the pleasure to meet in Italy. It reminded me actually of something also from the Bible. Like, he only spoke Italian, and my Italian is functional but not fantastic. Like, I can understand people some of the time, and I can communicate sometimes, but not in mystic kind of level of understanding. And I came and sat with him, and I think by now he has an interpreter actually, but at that point he didn't have an interpreter. And my friend was there to be the interpreter. And at one point I just turned to my friend and I said, "It's okay, you don't have to translate." And my friend said, "What? Like, I'm here for that." I said, "Don't worry, I understand everything he says." That was true. Anyway, the passage it reminded me of was, there's this passage right after the uh, resurrection of Christ, that the disciples could speak in diverse tongues and be understood. It's like the understanding that comes from here, from your heart, from the generosity of your heart, is surpasseth what comes from the mind. Anyway, we were speaking together, and I just quote this because it's, to me, an example of the power of the love of Christ and of the great masters of the world. But this man comes to me and he looks at me and he says, "I will always love you, and through you, all the people that you love." I said, "What?" If someone says to you, "I love you," that's already a very auspicious exchange. If somebody says, "I love you, and through you, every person that you have ever loved or will ever love," that's a whole different level. And while we were sitting there, I thought, who was Padre Pio? Like, here I'm sitting with this man. He spoke words that are as alive in my heart today as they were as the moment that he spoke them. Who was his teacher? And then I felt, and who was his teacher? His teacher was Christ. That is love that cannot be described. Love that surpasseth all understanding. I was just in a meeting with a friend. I was talking about my own teacher in India just an hour ago. And I said to her, my teacher had unbelievable merits. He was highly qualified on every level. But I think in the end, the thing that won me over was that I never saw even one moment where his love was not alive and well. He always treated me with the utmost care, love, respect. And once or twice he had to speak strongly to me. But even that was an expression of his love. And that's why so many years later, he's still living in my heart. And that's the same of that's the same power that let's say that's the unspeakable reverence with which you would approach such a being as Christ, whose love was so powerful that 2,000 years later, more than 2,000 years later, he's still remembered. And alive in so many hearts. Thus is the power, the grace, the glory of that which cannot be spoken. This is the journey of yoga, discovering that which cannot be spoken, but can be experienced. That's the key. I remember when I first was in India, one of the scriptures of India says, God cannot be proven. And I was a bit like, oh, that doesn't really sit right. But I think what it means is that God cannot be proven in a test tube. Like, you cannot prove the existence of the divinity of life because life itself is the divinity. It cannot be proved in a scientific experiment, but it can be proved by inner investigation in your own heart. When that investigation has succeeded, it does not necessarily easily translate into words. Words are not the language of the spirit. Silence is the language of the spirit. Meditation is the doorway through which we enter into that kingdom. Just today, on one of the calls, one of the women, 40-day meditation challenge that she set up for herself, she said, my soul is loving it. I was like, yes. Silence is the language of your soul. And in Christmas time, where there's potentially lots of other activities that are not that are more outwardly joyful, take some moments of inner reflection. Take some moments to feel that presence in your heart. I used to every year do the meditation the midnight before Christmas, like starting at maybe 11 or 11:30 and then crossing over 12 o'clock. If you're sensitive energetically, you really can feel. It's like you cross into Christmas Day. There's a whole nother energy happening. It's extremely auspicious day for meditation, for prayer, for inner celebration. So in the inside of the outer celebration, let there be also inward celebration, contemplation, joy, gratitude to one of the great gifts to all of humanity, which was the extraordinary life of Jesus Christ. Thank you, 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 thank you for the opportunity to be with you in a 10-minute exploration of the infinity. Actually, it's probably not 10 minutes, but it is eternity. We'll end with one line from Yogananda's poem, "Eternity and I, one united ray. A tiny bubble of laughter. I have become the sea of mirth itself." Thank you.